Good evening, everybody. Today is Monday, January 7th, 2019, and this is the first council meeting for this new year in 2019. If you would all arise and please join me in saying the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, now, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to read a proclamation for a Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. Whereas National Concerns of Police Survivors, COPS, was organized in 1984 to support families and co-workers of officers killed in the line of duty and provide resources to help them rebuild their shattered lives. And whereas National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day was established by COPS and first observed in 2015 to support the safety of and positive interactions of law enforcement officers within a community, much in keeping with the City of Moscow's community policing policy. And whereas each year COPS, with the partnerships of other organizations, promotes National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day to show law enforcement officers that citizens recognize the difficult career that they have chosen in public service to serve all of us. And whereas every day throughout our nation, men and women in uniform put their lives on the line, many of whom have made the ultimate sacrifice in the service to their communities. Whereas Moscow police officers bravely and selflessly risk their lives to protect our community from dangerous and uncertain situations through their faithful, loyal, and dedicated services. And whereas act of kindness and appreciation from citizens for our officers provide them the needed encouragement and support to comfort the intense situations that they face every day. Now, therefore, I, Bill Lambert, Mayor of the City of Moscow, do hereby proclaim the 9th of January, 2019 as Law Enforcement Appreciation Day in the City of Moscow, and I encourage our citizens to do something special for our community's peacekeepers and take the time to show appreciation for the massive sacrifices our officers make while protecting our community. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I have Captain Tyson Barrett with our Moscow Police Department, as well as Officer Joe Sieverding on behalf of the Fraternal Order of Police, that I'd like to present this proclamation to you. Joe's not here.
Oh, Joe.
No, he can. Ready?
I'd just like to thank the mayor and the city council for doing things like this. It just goes to show that you do support the Moscow Police Department and our mission to make sure this is a safe community to work, go to school, live, and to visit. So again, thanks to the council and the mayor for recognizing the Moscow Police Department, especially on behalf of the chief of police and the men and women of Moscow PD. Thank you.
Captain Bear, to lead a prosperous, vibrant community, we need an excellent police department, which we have, as well as supplied and supported by our other officers in the county as well as the state. And so without that, you don't have a vibrant community, because you guys do keep the peace. So to the men and women, thank you very much. Okay, with that, ladies and gentlemen, I will move on. Council, organization, and commission assignments. I'll turn this over to President Catherine Bonzo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We did have the workshop prior to the city council meeting where we had a chance to talk about the council organization. And the council organization has to do with who's the president of the council, the vice president of the council, and all our commissionships, liaisonships, and board seats. And with that, we will, would like a nomination to accept the slate.
So nominated.
Second.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to accept the slate. The slate looks like this. Council president will be Jim Bolin. Council vice president will be Art. No. Excuse me, that's not correct. Brandy Sullivan. That's okay.
Oh, it is a.
Darn. It was almost a coup.
And then the meeting times have been changed, which will be noted on the assignments, as well as all the different positions changes. So with that, do we need a vote by voice, or do we?
By voice, I think it'd be fine.
Okay, so starting on the end with Brandy, would you please vote?
Aye.
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 Okay, so the slate was unanimously accepted, and so now we'll take this moment to reorganize ourselves.
Yep, we will take by custom to the right side of the mayor is where the council president sits, and on the left side is where the vice president sits. So we'll take a few moments and get everybody organized into their right spots.
Let's just switch and later, and I'll clean mine out later.
Do you want a slide?
Want you to know I'm taking these.
Things down. Actually, this is the preps.
Thank you for warming the chair.
We're under and not being a direct line of everything.
So you do the right of me once more, Jim?
Yeah.
Here we go.
Oh, yeah. No, who's got the over-under money? You do. No, I gave it to Catherine. Over-under money?
No, we got rid of that when
Did
I
we-
came in.
You needed 2 more
Gave it
hands,
to
you're fine.
some charitable cause.
Oh, okay.
Well, one of the good things, ladies and gentlemen, and one of the fun things about having 4 lady counselors on our commission up front here as counselors, I always have way to the far left and way to the far right, I have ladies, so how can you go wrong with that? So with that, we will start with our next item, which is staff recognition report. Gary, have you got anything for us, sir?
Nothing for this evening, Your Honor.
Okay, none. Mayoral appointments, I have 2 that I want council to take into consideration this evening. Jesse Martinez, Human Rights Commission, term expires 12/31 of 2021. And Renee Love, Farmers Market Commission, term expires 12/31 of 2018. And she is a specialty food vendor position that we're replacing on that. So with that, I'd entertain a motion from someone.
I move to accept the appointments.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Art and a second by Ann to approve the slate as such. I'll start the roll with Catherine.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you all. With that, we will move on to item number 4, which is public comment and mayor's response period. This is where we allow folks to get up and talk to us about concerns they may have. We give them 3 minutes to state their name and let us know it's on their minds, as long as it's something that is not on this evening's agenda or something that is coming in front of Planning and Zoning and/or Board of Adjustments. So if you'd like, please come up. Okay, well, with that, we will move on to item number 5, appeal a conditional use permit. Leah Carlson will be presenting, and before Leah gets started here, ladies and gentlemen, I do want to make a couple of comments on this appeal. This is a public meeting and not a public hearing. However, with that being said, once Leah presents, we will let the appellant, the applicant, state the position, and then we will also let those that had testified in front of the Board of Adjustment can speak as well, and we'll limit that time to 3 minutes each, but it can only be those folks that testified before the board. And also, in addition to that, no new testimony can be brought in. We're going to be working with the testimony that we had, and all the council has had their packets to study and read it. So with that, Lee, I'll turn it over to you.
Your Honor, if I may as well.
Gary?
I would note as well that this is not a time to retestify. This is a time to advocate for the position that you took at the public hearing. So no new testimony will be accepted.
Okay, thank you. So this evening, for your review, we have an appeal for a denied conditional use permit located at 1400 East 7th Street. And the original proposal was for an 80-foot tall wireless communications facility located again at 1400 East 7th Street, which is the Church of the Nazarenes campus. The design was for a stealth-style tower meant to resemble a tree, and it was fully enclosed within an 800 square foot lease area and designed to accommodate 3 carriers. So site and area land use, the Church of the Nazarene campus is split into 11 parcels, totaling 231,678 square feet. And the proposed site is located on the southwest corner of the campus. Here we have a zoning map showing that the subject property is located within the neighborhood business zoning district, surrounded by R3, which is a residential zone, and R2, also a residential zone. There's other pockets of neighborhood business as well around here. And you can see here on this vicinity map, again, there's some businesses nearby. There's a funeral chapel, orthodontics office. It's primarily residential, but there's also 2 community parks nearby. And this just shows a site plan. And so you can see here, this is the entire block of the Church of the Nazarenes campus. This house here on the corner is owned by the Church of the Nazarenes, so the proposed tower is just right to the north of that. This is just a closer-up view of the previous slide. And you can see the 800 square foot enclosed area, the spaces for the 3 carriers in there, and then this is a shed to the side. So the shed that's currently there is just going to be moved over approximately 20 feet to the east. And this final site plan just shows everything coming together, the shed, the 800 square foot lease area, the 3 spaces for the carriers, and then the tree. So the applicant also provided us with a couple of renders showing us what the tree, the facility would look like. So this shows from the northeast perspective what it looks like now, and then with the tower, you can see it coming up there in the middle. I'll go through these twice so you can see. Southeast view, and finally the southwest view. So the applicant also provided us with a map showing the coverage of the area currently. And you can see that there's a large service gap on the eastern side of the city here. And so where the proposed tower would be, you can see that with this next map here, it would take care of that service gap in the eastern side of the city. So there's also 8 development standards that are listed in Moscow City Code for cell phone towers that have to be addressed. So I'm just going to go briefly through the 8 development standards. So the first one has to do with setbacks. So no antenna tower that exceeds 60 feet in height shall be located within 500 feet from the State Highway 8 and Highway 95 right-of-way. The proposed tower will be located approximately 3,400 feet north of State Highway 8, so it's sufficiently out of the way. Number 2 relates to security. Every telecommunications facility shall be protected from unauthorized access by appropriate security measures. So the proposed site is enclosed by a 6-foot high fence, and the ancillary facilities are fully enclosed within the proposed site as well. Number 3, lighting. Every antenna and antenna tower shall not be lighted, and such lighting shall not be more than the minimum required by the agency. So the plans that we received did not show any lighting. Number 4 has to do with noise. So when the adjacent property is zoned SR, so suburban residential, R1, R2, R3, or R4, which are all residential zones, or occupied by a dwelling, hospital, school, library, or nursing home, or similar use, noise-generating equipment shall be sound buffered by means of baffling barriers or other suitable means to reduce sound levels measured at the property line to 45 decibels. So there's a backup generator that will run once a week for approximately 1 hour for maintenance. And if noise becomes a problem, then a decibel reading will be taken at the property line and staff will take corrective action if the reading is too high. Number 5, signage. The placement of signage on the antenna tower is prohibited except for the placement of security signage. Again, there's no signs shown on the plans. Number 6, antenna towers shall be separated from the property line of any adjacent property in a residential zone at least a distance equal to the height of the antenna tower and shall be separated from all other adjacent property lines at least a distance equal to 1/2 the height of the antenna tower. So the nearest adjacent property that meets the standard is 100 feet away, so it meets the standard. Number 7 has to do with aesthetic considerations. Antennas and cables shall be of color identical to or closely compatible with that of the structure to which they are attached. Facilities shall be surrounded by a minimum 6-foot tall wall or solid slated fence. So the proposed tower is designed to resemble a pine tree. with the goal of improving aesthetic compatibility within the surrounding area. And the submitted plans show the 6-foot tall fence surrounding the site. And finally, number 8, any new or relocated antenna tower 80 feet tall or greater in height shall be designed and constructed to accommodate at least 2 additional users. And as I mentioned previously, the proposed facility is designed to accommodate 3, so it does meet this as well. So prior to the hearing on November 13th, we did receive 1 letter in opposition to the tower, as well as 2 emails in opposition. And then during the hearing, 13 individuals did speak also in opposition of the tower, 12 of whom were neighbors living within a quarter mile of the subject property. 3 of those individuals shared concerns regarding noise. 3 individuals shared concerns about property value depreciation. And 7 individuals expressed concern due to aesthetic concerns, including the scale of the tower in comparison to nearby residences. So the Board of Adjustment denied this conditional use permit because they found that the proposal did not meet criterion number 2 of relevant standards and criteria. Criterion number 2 is the character of the proposed use will be in harmony with the neighborhood and surrounding land uses. So they found this because the proposed wireless communications facility is not consistent with the existing character of the uses within the surrounding neighborhood and will not be in harmony with land uses surrounding the property. The surrounding neighborhood is primarily residential, and the scale of the tower is significantly larger than other structures or trees in the area. And finally, this was supported by public testimony expressing concern over the scale of the tower, decreased property value, noise, and other aesthetic concerns as well. And so this evening, these are the options before you. Either sustain the decision of the board in whole or in part, reverse the decision of the board in whole or in part, remand the matter in whole or in part to the board with comments and/or instructions for further consideration, or take other such actions deemed appropriate. And with that, I will take any questions you might have.
Questions for Leah before we get into hearing from other folks?
I do, and
Gina.
I'm not sure I'm allowed to ask them, so please screech if I'm asking. So there were a couple things that I read through and then I still don't have clarification.
Sure.
Space for other carriers within that 200 square foot box, or 20 by, I don't remember, but inside there were 3 different spots.
Correct.
What does that mean? What does space for those mean? Does that mean that's another generator, another tower? What is that?
I think that would be a question better suited for the applicant, because I'm not sure about the engineering.
Okay. Okay.
Perhaps Bill could answer.
Bill?
Generally, that's for a ground enclosure for all of their supporting communications equipment. So a typical larger wireless telecommunications installation has a shack that includes all of their communications equipment. It's where it's connected to the fiber optic network that carries the signals out from
a
there
box,
beyond.
then.
So it's an equipment cabinet.
Okay.
So I think what they illustrated there were 3 possible equipment cabinets
Spots.
could be placed within their equipment surround.
Okay, awesome. And my second question was regarding corrective action if the decibel level is too high. What does that mean?
So that could mean providing additional coverage to the noise producing, or to the generator. But yeah, I believe.
Well, I think what Gina's asking is, so if it's over that amount, what do you do? Do you close the tower down or what? Not,
I think that was what her question was. Am I
Right.
correct,
Yeah.
Gina?
Right,
Yes.
there, yeah. Oh, sorry, Bill. go
If I may, so then they could not operate that. They'd have to take corrective action. So whether that's screening, enclosing, sound absorbing material, additional mufflers, they would have to take actions to meet that standard. And we would inspect that, have them run it at the time of final inspection of the facility. And they
Okay.
could not operate it until they were in compliance.
So you measure it on installation and then
Correct.
after, okay, great, thank you.
Randy?
I have a question about the decibel readings. Is that taken from the house that's nearest to the proposed tower?
From
Bring up the criteria if you could. I
Sure.
think it
Yeah.
references adjacent property lines.
Yeah, I believe,
At 100 feet, you mean?
5?
as measured at the property line. Yes, so at the property line.
at the property line that it is on, is what you're
Correct.
talking about, correct?
Correct.
So there's a house that is on that property, but it would be
Correct.
measured on the other side of the house.
That's correct.
Okay, well, thank you, Leah. We'll bring you back up if we have other questions for you. At this time, I'd like to hear from the applicant, the appellant. If you'd please come up and state your name, sir, and address.
Thank you. Richard Bush, B-U-S-C-H. Address is 1420 Northwest Gilman Boulevard, Issaquah, Washington. Mr. Mayor, thank you. Council members, thank you. The principal concern we have is the comparison of the sole reason for the denial, which is the scale of the facility. When you compare that with two aspects of the city's code. The two aspects of the city's code are, one, what is encouraged for wireless communications facilities under the code, and then second, what's required. So the objection is to the size of the facility. And the code encourages co-location. And if you're going to have co-location, the facility must be larger. The code has more than what Leah has referred to. The code not only says if you're at 80 feet, you have to accommodate 3, but if you come in with a smaller facility, you have to commit to increasing the size of the facility or even perhaps replacing it to accommodate more carriers when they come. So the legitimate design of the code is to encourage fewer quantities of towers, fewer facilities. But the trade-off is, in order to provide coverage for all the carriers who want to provide coverage in the area, you have to have a taller facility. So the facility is designed as a 3-carrier pole. If this was designed just to accommodate 1 carrier, theoretically it could be 20 feet lower. But because of the requirement, it's 30 feet. It's now at 80 feet as opposed to 60 feet. And the second piece is, well, I just mentioned both of them. It's the additional height required in exchange for encouraging co-location. So when, on the one hand, the code says make it bigger, and then it's a conditional use, which means if you meet the conditions, it's approved, and then they deny it because it's too big, you're in conflict with yourself. Make it bigger, denied. And it's like you're setting this particular property, this particular facility, this particular carrier up for failure. So the code can't require a larger facility, and then you can't deny it because it's a larger facility. So the real question becomes, is a wireless communications facility in the neighborhood business zone prohibited outright? Well, take it one step at a time through the code. First, the code doesn't prohibit it outright. It's a conditional use. And then it sets up a whole list of criterion, which the board did say we met. The only element that wasn't met, all the factual criteria were met. The only one was the subjective compatibility with the surrounding area. So when you take a look at the surrounding area at this particular property, it's not like it's flat land or one-story houses all around. Immediately adjacent on the same parcel, you have a 50-foot tall structure. And the dome, like I said in the letter, the dome is much larger volumetrically than the wireless communications facility. Second, you do have the transmission lines, which the board decision didn't mention at all, that are along Mountain View, that are significantly taller than the building and pretty close to the same size as the proposed facility. Then finally, in the surrounding neighborhood, you have trees that are roughly the same size, 60 feet tall, as in the record. And there's no finding that the proposed facility is different than those other trees when it comes to the scope or scale. So as written, the board decision, frankly, is in conflict with the code because we're required to design it the way we did. It's a permitted conditional use, and then you can't deny us for doing what is allowed and that meets the criteria under the code. If you take a look at what else is in the community today, where you have wireless communications facilities in nearby residential zones, if you go to Rotary Park, you do have the water tank that has wireless communications facilities on the tank. And there you have immediately surrounding the park residential properties. So when you take a look at the city's code, and the way it's been applied in the community today, similar installations are accommodated with residential as the surrounding uses. So I do believe that you need to overturn the decision, reverse it in whole, and approve it. If for some reason you think there's something missing from the record and you think you have the authority to remand it to the board for further review and additional testimony, we're glad to go that path. But we don't think that's necessary because the record on its face merits approval, a reversal and approval of the permit. I am glad to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Bush, you may have some as we go along, of course, and you'll get a chance to speak again.
Very good.
Okay, so thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
testimony. Okay, as a reminder, those folks that did testify, I will allow you to speak. I will give you 3 minutes. But if you did not testify, please don't come up here because I'm just going to have to sit you back down. And I don't want to have to do that. But if you did testify during the Board of Adjustment, you're welcome to come on up and state your name and address and address us. And oh, by the way, it can't be anything different than what you said in the body of the meeting, the public meeting.
David Hall, 1334 Wallen Road, Moscow. One clarification, does it have to be something that I testified personally that I repeat, or can it be something that was brought up by other people
David,
during the talk?
you need to advocate toward the decision of the Board of Adjustment. So you don't get to retestify and say the same things that you said in front of the Board of Adjustment. Your position here is to advocate for your position. Why what you said at that time is directly applicable to the actions you'd like the council to make.
Okay. I agree with the Board of Adjustment decision as it was made that it does not fit in the neighborhood, as all who testified were opposed. The applicant representative stated that other applications had primarily been positive, so that indicates that it does not fit in with this neighborhood as it should, and there seem to be other feasible locations. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Ferris Paxton, 824 Park Drive. I want to thank y'all for hearing this issue tonight, as well as many other issues that I'm not a part of or have anything to do with, but thank you for your service to Moscow. Could we see the exact reason why it was denied last time? Is that possible? Yeah, I didn't catch the wording again. The character of the proposed use will be in harmony with the neighborhood and surrounding land uses. I guess I just wanted to speak to that from what the board decided last time. The neighborhood businesses that are around there, we talked about other businesses that are around that area. All those businesses are very harmonious with the neighborhood. You can go in, you can meet those people, you can talk to them, you can say hello, you can know they care about the community they're in, they're a part of it. They're concerned about our well-being as much as we are concerned about their prosperity and their well-being. So it's a little bit, it's not so much in the harmony in that regard with our neighborhood businesses that we have there already. Also along those lines, it was mentioned also by Mr. Bush that this would accommodate other carriers. The testimonies that happened last time did mention that we all had Sprint, Verizon, AT&T coverage just fine in the neighborhood. Nobody seemed to be lacking coverage because of this lack of a cell tower. And harmony also in character of the neighborhood. How many pine trees do you know that are surrounded by a 6-foot fence? None of the pine trees I have in my backyard require a 6-foot fence around them. And also it was discussed last time that the actual height of with the foliage on the top of the antenna makes it go up to 82, 83 feet. But also they said that additional technology could be added, not for the structure, but antenna-wise, that would also increase it another up to 10 feet, maybe more, and then foliage on top of that to keep within the aesthetic of the neighborhood. So there was, and I'm not sure, I don't have the exact number on that, but there was talk that it could be increased at a later point in time as well. So I trust you guys' decision, and I hope that you uphold the decision of the board.
Thank you, Mr. Paxton.
I'm Maury Weiss at 711 Park Drive. in Moscow. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm not sure I did testify before in opposition. I would like this opportunity now just to bring up that northeast view, that we can put it up there again, perhaps. And since my house is directly across from it, as are a dozen of my neighbors, I think you can see very dramatically the aesthetics involved here. Looking northeast.
Lee, I think the simulation.
Is it one of these photos that you were?
That's
Yes,
southeast,
Okay.
This one.
southwest.
Show the tower. So half a dozen of my neighbors are directly in that point, as am I. And again, I ask that this be denied. Is that compatible with this neighborhood? I think not. And I appreciate the Board of Adjustment's earlier decision. Thank you.
Is it okay to ask him?
Thank you,
a
Mr.
question about
Rice.
his testimony? Because he had something else he said
Yes,
too.
you can.
Excuse me,
Is it relating to the finding of the Board of Adjustment?
it's relating to why he opposed the tower.
We need to, if you're going to ask him a question, Catherine, is that
Yeah, it's
correct?
based on his testimony.
Mr. Weeks, would you please get back up to the podium, sir? Catherine has a question to ask you. That way we can hear it, and it's on our public record, sir.
Right?
Thank you. The reason you identified one of the reasons that you spoke against the tower, but your other reason had to do with the diesel generator. Did you want to?
Well, if each, yes, it wasn't clear to me whether if these other carriers come in, they'll each have their own diesel generator. That means 3 running engines for testing as opposed to 1. That could be a potential noise issue, as well as a pollution issue. I'm assuming these are diesel engines, but no one clarified that evening, and I'd still like to know that answer.
Thank you.
Okay, well,
So I guess we'll assume that there's a diesel engine for every carrier that might eventually come to that site.
That information wasn't generated in the public hearing, so that's not at issue tonight.
thank you, Mr. Weeks.
Good evening. My name is Kensington Hill, and I spoke at the last hearing as well. My address is 721 Park Drive. And I would also like to speak to the aesthetics of the neighborhood. It was stated that this is not a flat area of land surrounded by single-story buildings. However, if we look at this picture in front of us, that is a single-story residence. Many of the residents in these neighborhoods are single-story ranchers, split-level ranchers. They're not 3-story apartment complexes. They're not 3-story houses. An 80-foot structure of this type simply doesn't fit with the topographical nature of the neighborhood. And while I agree it may fit all of the factual qualifications, you can't tell me what to think is pretty and what to think is a pig in lipstick. And that is essentially what this is, even if it's set next to a 50-foot structure. It's just an 80-foot eyesore. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hill.
Hi, excuse me. My name is Jeff Loneker at 1022 East 8th Street. And I guess follow along. It's going to be a huge monument that we got to look at every day. And it really is a single carrier issue. The cell phone map that they showed, there's coverage all throughout there. It's that one carrier that does not have service in that area. As at the time of the meeting last time, there were no other carriers that were signed up to go on this tower. I can only assume they already have coverage in that area, so they don't need to co-locate. It makes me wonder why T-Mobile can't co-locate on those other towers that are already being used by those other companies. So cell phone coverage is not an issue. It's really about, I guess, giving one company an advantage in the neighborhood by giving them a gigantic tower that none of us really want in that area. So I was very relieved, and I fully support the Board of Adjustments ruling last time. And I really hope you guys would listen to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak for you tonight. My name is Mike Scott, 1130 Kamiakin Street, Moscow. And my concern, as I expressed it at the previous meeting of the Planning Commission, was of depreciated lost land values, which could vary between 10 and 25% on the studies I've looked at. So it's a loss of income for folks that are interested in reselling property. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you for the opportunity, Zachary Thomas, 1103 East 7th. I spoke last time. There is a group home that is located across the street from the property border there, looking out the front of the church. That group home houses 8 individuals with disabilities. I'm very prideful of the fact that those individuals get an opportunity to be within the community of Moscow. I think Moscow does a very good job at promoting them the chance to engage in our community. I worry about the decibel level, regardless if it's muffled and down to 45 decibels due to the sensitive nature of their disabilities. And I would really hate to see something like this drive them out of a home that they've been at for a very long time now. That would be beyond challenging for that home and that company that helps house those individuals. And so, yeah, I would worry about those folks and the place that they've called home for quite a while now. Thank you.
Thanks, Zach.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Michael Kite, 1009 East 7th. I spoke against the conditional use permit last time. I was happy with the decision of the Board of Adjustment. My concern then, and it remains now, is I didn't have a sense in reading all the material that was put together that there was really much, at least documented, that there were other more suitable locations that are appropriate. I have 2 questions. I guess one goes back to the picture that you had up that's showing the tower. Has anybody measured to verify that is, or what height that is? Is that 80? Is that 60? Is that 85 of that sketch? Do we know?
My understanding, it's 80. Is that correct, Leah?
Yes, it was provided by the applicant, so.
So the staff is not verified?
Correct.
I mean, as an engineer, I guess I can get out my triangle and trig tables and do that measurement, but I haven't yet. But I just would be curious whether that's been checked or not. Anyway, I continue to hold my strong view that it's just not appropriate to build this, especially considering that there's other possible locations that this could be located in. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael.
Mr. Mayor, Council, my name is Bruce Menadier. I live at 1121 East 8th Street. I too was here at the last Board of Adjustment meeting and was one of the people that testified. Generally, the challenge that I have is that there was a lot of talk about all the towers around town that had been, that things were existing already on, but they were already existing structures. As far as I know, there are no towers in this city that are even close to this size. And in fact, I've seen the one down by Safeway, which is much smaller. And I don't know how many carriers they have on there, but this is just way, way too large for our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gary Saunders. I live at 1217 Kamayakan Street, just down from the park. And I testified last time and just wanted to express my support for the finding of the board to deny the request. Some of the concerns I had that were mentioned last time was reference the co-location, that the co-location requirement, but there's been no proof showing that it would be that there would be other carriers interested in joining it, and then also the just fitting in as we mentioned the Rotary Park towers. I don't know that anybody even knows those cell towers are there because they did such a good job of hiding those. It's just not hidden. Everybody who drives by will know that there is a tower here, and it just doesn't fit. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. I had three other original folks that testify they must not be here this evening, I guess, or, okay, come on up.
I'm Martha Ford, 1009 East 7th, Moscow. And I just didn't want to take up too much time of just repeating. I certainly was very happy with the decision that was made. My main concerns when I testified were just the aesthetics of it in the neighborhood, a concern about the height. I was the person that did bring up the fact that the actual plans say 85 feet, while everything calls it an 80-foot tower, and that it is technically 5 more feet of coverage by foliage. And that is the question of if this actually is 80 feet, or if that includes the extra foliage, which we couldn't tell. I also am concerned about the effect, as was said, no one is going to miss the fact of this, and I think that the concern about property values stems from that obvious fact. So, thank you.
Thank you, Martha.
Can I ask her a question?
Martha, please.
You also testified about the decibels, and you mentioned that you said you thought that most generators run 65 decibels.
Yeah, I thought, well,
You're not sure.
I don't think that was my point. I think my point was that the 45 was a very low standard. I don't know that I was I think it's, at the time, I did see that that was common, that many ran at 65, and I was concerned that at 45 decibels, being a very low standard, that just saying, well, if there's a problem, we'll deal with it, wasn't very comfortable for me, because I thought there might well be a problem. And certainly if there's no problem with the power, or if you're talking 1 hour a week, maybe it's right to say, well, if anyone complains or if they run in the daytime, it's not a problem. But you never know how much it really would be needed at other times of backup power if power goes out, something like that. So that was my concern.
Thank you, Martha.
Does that answer?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, we heard from 11 people, so I'm guessing the other folks are not here or do not want to come up. So I will go back to Mr. Bush for rebuttal.
Thank you. Again, willing to answer any questions you may have, but I will like to respond to a few of the items that were brought up. First, the noise. As was mentioned before, we're at the zoning, the land use planning stage. And the question about what type of generator, what the noise levels will be, all takes place during the building permit and approval stage. So technologically, it's possible to have a generator that meets the code requirement of 45 decibels. If the particular unit that's installed doesn't meet that standard, there are things that can be done, like a different muffler on it. You can put sound baffling material on the inside of the fence. You can put it in some type of an enclosure. But as a practical matter, the generator exhaust could be directed toward a different direction, like toward the church. So if there's any noise, it goes in the direction that the exhaust is pointing, and it would go toward the church as opposed to the closer adjoining property lines. So there are a variety of things that can be done when it comes to noise to make sure it's in compliance with the code. And it is correct, if it doesn't comply with code, it can't be used. It won't be approved after the building permit inspection is performed. Concerning coverage from T-Mobile versus other carriers, I don't know if it's in the record what the quality of service is from the other carriers, but there is undisputed evidence in the record that T-Mobile has a significant gap in coverage in this geographic area. Under federal law, every carrier has the right to provide coverage on its own without regard to whether Verizon is there, Sprint, AT&T, T-Mobile. Every carrier has the right to provide coverage on their own. So it's irrelevant whether AT&T, Verizon, or Sprint has coverage here. This is for T-Mobile, and they have shown in the record that, and it's undisputed, that there's no coverage there. So the fact that there's others is irrelevant, and it's not a part of the code criteria as well, so that's not a grounds for supporting the decision. Concerning alternate sites, it's clear in the record, and I think the board found that it's been shown there are no other sites that are feasible. There's no existing sites, and when you look in the area where this site is proposed to be located, you're looking at a similar makeup, and this is one of the few neighborhood business zones where it's some level of compatibility. And I do want to go back to the aerial view, if you can drive the machine for us. When we talk about scale, you take a look at the southwest view.
Sorry, for some reason it's not working.
That's right. Facilities are going to be visible. I mean, from the southwest view, this is the most prominent view that there would be of the facility. Just like when you go down to Mountain View Street.
I'll have to control.
Oh, sure, go right ahead. Not going to work?
It's not going to work. Maybe it's
Up and down button.
There you go.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
I think it's,
Let me just get out of this here.
there you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you looking for
Okay.
this one?
That's good. Yeah, that one there.
Okay, great.
Okay. Anytime you bring utility improvements to a community, they're going to be visible. You have the electric power transmission lines along Mountain View. You drive past them, you see them. But people recognize them as a part of the community. When you go up to Rotary Park, that water tank and the wireless communication facilities are not hidden, but it's accommodated in the community. This is the same situation where, yes, it's going to be visible. Under the code, it could be not a monopine if you want a smaller structure, if you want a smaller profile. It could be a monopole painted in a subtle color that doesn't reflect light. I mean, that's also the preference under the code. But what the applicant is trying to do here is provide one that's more integrated into the community. So if you find that the scale of the facility, because of its girth, its width, is inappropriate, then you can condition it upon a monopole that's painted a dark color that doesn't reflect light. But the reality is that anytime you bring improvements into the community like this, they're going to be visible, unless like sewer, water. You don't put those above ground other than the water tanks. Under the code criteria that you have to evaluate, to say that it's not compatible, it goes against the requirements that are in the code and whether we've met those requirements. I'm glad to answer any questions you have.
Mr. Bush, I got a question for you because there was a concern about the height, if this thing is 80 feet tall, the very peak of this thing. on the picture? Is that 80 feet?
Whatever's in, I will look at the plans now, but usually what they do is they refer to the height of the actual structure itself, the pole inside of the facility. And then there's usually a lightning rod at the top. These things do get hit by lightning, and you have to have a lightning rod to accommodate
Is that part of
for
the
that.
80 feet, or is that something?
That's usually, the staff usually does not include that as a part of the 80 feet. I'm going to go look at the drawings right now.
Okay.
Okay, so the top of the structure is 80 feet. The top of the foliage is 85 feet. I don't see a lightning rod there.
Okay.
One
Brandy.
question. I think in that southwest view, is that fence a rendering of what the 6-foot fence would look like? And do you know the dimensions of the rectangle that
Yes.
the fence would encompass?
The southwest view, is that the one where you have the home in front of you?
It's the real tall one, the most tallest.
The most-
looking one.
There's a
You
fence
don't-
in
you
that
don't see
picture.
it- I don't think you see a fence in that picture.
Okay, so none of these show.
No, none of them show the
scale
fence.
of the fence and how that would look in that location.
I'm looking for a horizontal drawing in the drawings or
Did you
the
look for
photo
the
sims.
stuff? Didn't show it.
Yeah, I don't think so. Could you?
Could you give it a shot?
I just have to work.
Didn't work so well the last time.
To do it the old-fashioned way here.
Oh, the drawing's very good. Yes, thank you.
Is this? I'm not
Do we
sure.
have a horizontal? I don't think we do we?
That's the only photo we have.
Oh, there we go. It's A2, sheet 2, so I think one more.
Oh, I don't have that one.
It's not in the deck?
No.
Oh, it's not in your deck. It might be in the record, but not in her PowerPoint presentation.
Actually, this is the first time I've seen this, so
Okay.
Bill, let me ask Bill a question on this. Bill, would you have any idea how big of a fence? We know it's 6 feet tall, but what Brandy's want to know is the squareness of this thing, if it's 20 feet by 20 feet or
And
Is that what your question is, Brandy?
Yes, and if
Okay.
there were any visuals of what that would look like in that location, just
Okay.
aside, we have the visuals of the tower itself, but
Yes.
what would the fence structure?
Okay, so what I'm hearing from staff is that there was not included in the record below a rendition of the fence that I have in my file here. Okay, so I'm going to speak to what's in the record, just so I don't run afoul of any of the requirements.
Okay.
So the dimensions that you see on this one, but you can't read because of the small type. I believe it's 40 by 20 is the size of the compound. So and that's the 800 square foot lease area. But during the building permit process, the applicant would be required to come in with a fence designed per code, which would either be a solid fence or a wire fence with slats to make it such that you can't see through to it. Okay, so the picture you had from the southwest view over the home, you had 25-foot tall arborvitae that will totally screen the equipment from the homes on the, help me out, the south side? Or is it the west side? I think it's the west side. The only time you would see the fence is from no, I'm going to get confused here. I think it's the west side. The home's directly across the west park, if I recall correctly. There we go, okay. The batteries found new life. Thank you. Okay, so it is Park Drive. The fence is behind the tree if you're directly, thank you, if you're directly across horizontally from the structure and the fence. And then if you go further north where it is NB zone, I believe that's where the mortuary is, looking toward the southeast is where you would be able to see the fence from that angle. And then from all the other angles, it's either blocked by the church or an extensive parking lot back to 6th Avenue, or 6th Street. So during the building permit phase, the design of the fence would be filed and reviewed by staff. And it is a view obscuring fence. Was that helpful?
Yes, thanks.
Art?
Yeah, relative to the location,
Did you actually explore any other areas? For example, the fairgrounds, Fire Station 2, or even the erection of a monopole up near the Vista water tank?
All I can say is what's in the record demonstrated that they considered alternate sites. And whatever's in the record, they did consider all what was considered to be all the available alternate sites that might be feasible. I don't remember the fire station as one of them, but I do remember there was a water tank that was considered and it was rejected.
It was mentioned that the water tank was considered as the actual supporting structure for the antennas, but it was deemed that the water tank was structurally insufficient to maintain those. However, did you look at the erection of a slender monopole up on top of that hill? Is the question that I have.
Okay, which hill are you referring to? The one by
One with
Hawthorne to the?
Hathaway Street.
Hathaway, sorry.
Yeah.
I don't, when it comes to a monopole, no, because if we're going to build a new monopole, we're going to locate it in a space that has plenty of room with no blockage from other structures.
That would be it.
Well, then that's why they came up with this.
Okay.
Catherine?
My question has to do, and I don't remember reading in the testimony, so I'm not sure if we can talk about it, because you just started talking about another type of structure that was in the code. Is that new information?
Why don't you ask the question and then we'll determine.
Right.
So the question.
Answer it. until-
Yeah, I'll wait on the answer till we get a judgment on it.
Because this has been seen as not effective way to get the cell service, and that you started mentioning another type of shorter structure, is that new information? Did you originally testify with that? Because I haven't found record of that.
Gary, would you?
I think what Mr. Bush said in his argument was that there were alternatives to put smaller monopole towers in, but it did not serve the need that the carrier wants for this installation.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
that is correct.
So then, I guess my question is, why are you bringing that up now? That's confusing to me.
Okay, because you have the ability to affirm, reverse, or in whole or in part. And one of the options to you under the code is to comply with the design criteria in the code. And the design criteria in the code expressly mentions having just the pole painted in a non-reflective color. Okay, so if you are instructed that you have the authority to reverse in part and condition this not on the larger monopine, but on a monopole, which is basically the interior of the structure painted in a non-reflective color. I believe, if you're instructed you have the ability to do that, that is expressly contemplated by the code.
Okay.
Other questions for Mr. Bush?
I have a
Jim?
question. The 80, 85-foot height of this structure, is that required for the T-Mobile service only, or does it have to be that high in order to accommodate the other two carriers as well?
Okay. The answer is it has to accommodate T-Mobile, taking into consideration that there are other carriers that we're obligated to accommodate. So every carrier will want to provide coverage that's useful for the footprint. And the lowest, you have to design the site based upon the lowest carrier needed height. So when the code requires us to accommodate 3 for an 80-foot tall, or for a structure, either upon application or eventually, you start designing from, okay, what does the neighborhood look like? And then what's the lowest rad transmission center you need? And then you go up 10 feet for each additional carrier. So that's why the elevation was proposed. That would work for T-Mobile. And I don't believe there's anything in the record that evaluates a lower height because they were required to be at that elevation.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Bush. Okay, I will turn this over to council and where you wanted to start the discussion.
Well, this has just become more complicated to me. than it was originally. So I would like to discuss, after hearing all the points of view brought up by the residents, which I very much appreciate, the information that I was just asking question about leads me to believe there's another way the carrier could be placed there and not be an eyesore. And there was the statement made that utility improvements are going to be visible, and we know as a body that infrastructure is not always seen in people's neighborhoods in the same way that we see it, as looking out for the whole community. And so I guess my question to you is, would it be worth looking at it, having that structure, because he said the federal law says that they can have coverage of their own, which means you don't have to have the 3 other carriers there.
What do you want to do, Catherine?
Then I would want to hear everybody else's thoughts, but I'm thinking of something.
Okay.
If I could, Your Honor?
Yeah.
If I might just provide some clarifying
Yeah, that would help.
information, I guess, on the co-location standards. So the code does read that any tower that's 80 feet or taller in height has to be designed to accommodate additional carriers. An alternate allowance is to allow a shorter tower if that company commits to either swap out or extend that tower in the future. So if you go to a smaller tower, you're still going to have to allow for the ability for it to be extended or swapped out or to be taller in the future to accommodate those additional carriers. So the tower that was discussed behind the east side is one of those that's designed to be extendable. That's why it is short for the first level, and the structures in the area are fairly low level with them all in that location. So you can start off with a smaller one, but the code is going to require them to commit to swapping out or extending that to accommodate those additional carriers in the future should a demand be realized. So it may allow a shorter antenna for a while, should it be approved, but there's going to be an obligation that they have to commit to in an agreement in writing that they will swap out or extend that tower if another carrier wishes to be located in that location.
Okay, thank you.
Question regarding, would that require an additional conditional use permit to extend the size of the tower? In other words, if you started out with a short tower, when you wanted to extend it for another carrier, would it require another conditional use permit?
If it's going to extend more than, I think, 14 feet vertically from the structure, 18 feet vertically, it would require another conditional use permit to alter that antenna tower.
And do we know what the minimum height would be for the applicant to provide service? Or is that not part of that's not part of the record?
No, we're not looking at that.
I think if you look at the height of structures are in the vicinity, they probably need to get clear sight above those. That might give you some guidance, but I don't want to speculate on that height.
So I just keep going back to what this is about, is looking at this criteria number 2. That is the reason that the Board of Adjustment rejected the applicant. And that is the character of the proposed use will be in harmony with the neighborhood and surrounding land uses. And, looking at the height of that and just doing the calculations, it's 40% higher than the tallest tree and almost 200% taller than the buildings, the homes that are 30 feet per the record. So that's where I'm thinking, with the board saying that character is not in harmony with the surrounding, that's a significant difference to me with just looking at that. I know it's not a objective measure as some of the other criterion, but that criteria does not have numbers associated with it. It's talking about harmony and does it fit?
Art. Yeah, to follow up on Brandy's comment a little bit, criteria number 2 here is all about qualitative judgments of what an aesthetic is. Mr. Bush is correct in that all of the factual standards have been met by the application, but when it comes down to aesthetics, it's in the eye of the beholder, and the applicant is attempting to provide a good aesthetic. However, the neighbors who are going to have to live with this for into the indefinite future have a different opinion of what the aesthetic appeal and whether it fits in what the neighborhood actually is. So it boils down to what one's judgment of a qualitative, subjective aesthetic is and who lives with it longer. So that's where I'm trying to focus, is what was the Board of Adjustment thinking when they made these judgments.
Ann, what's your thoughts?
I agree with what Art said, and I actually really like that we have something so subjective in nature in here. I think it provides a nice opportunity for people to comment, people who live in that area, and that decision seems to make sense to me.
I would think to overturn the Board of Adjustment, you would have to argue, based on what we saw, that that character, from what we saw, is in harmony with the neighborhood, and that's where, that's really the only thing that we are here to consider, to reconsider. I would have a hard time disagreeing with their assessment.
Gina?
I commend the applicant for making that cell tower as nice as it can look. An 85-foot tall tree, if it's a tree, is a beautiful thing to me. I do agree with the sentiment of my co-counselors in that neighborhood, that is not a characteristic of that neighborhood at all. And so it stands out as an eyesore. I also am very concerned about the noise, whether or not it runs one day a week. Shunting it towards the church is a problem in itself, the noise. And so I just think that I haven't found compelling, for lack of a better word that might make you guys get upset, I can't find compelling evidence to overturn what the board has decided.
Art?
One other small point is that I'm not sure that the applicant provided enough evidence to me to indicate whether all of the potential sites have been well-researched in order to accommodate this facility. And so without knowing whether actual testing had been done on other alternatives, it makes it difficult to say that it has to go there.
Right. Bill, I have.
Okay, Gina?
I also, in reading through a lot of the testimony and the emails that included the studies and that sort of thing on the electromagnetic fields, I don't feel like that was answered well either. And it might be voodoo science, but show me that it is, if it is. And if it's not, then I think it is something we have to take into account as well.
Well, I think tonight we can't take that into
Right,
consideration,
right.
even though we may want to. That's not.
I agree with
the
that.
task we have is to determine, do we overturn that the character of this is in harmony with its existing neighborhood?
What we do, ladies and gentlemen, is we either sustain the decision of the board in whole, or we reverse the decision of the board, or we reprimand it back to the board. Those are the three decisions that we have in front of us.
Well, I move to sustain the decision of the board in whole.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Catherine and a second by Jim to sustain the Board of Adjustment's decision. We all clear on that? I'll start the roll with Ann.
Aye.
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 Okay, and the sustained board's decision holds. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay, we will move on to item number 6, which is First Amendment to Financial Services Agreement. Gary Riedner has got the podium.
I knew that wasn't what we could talk about, but they didn't make a solid argument.
I've seen those monoplanes in my life. Don't look at anything. It's like me surprised at the beach. It's good from far, but far from good. I got crazy to climb the thing. I mean, yeah. Oh my goodness.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, Gary.
What we have before you tonight is, it's a little bit misleading. The First Amendment to the Financial Services Agreement was when we had intended that the agreement that we were currently obligated or had negotiated with Piper Jaffray for financial representation, financial services for a general obligation bond issue, which we entered into in 2016. We thought we could just amend it and move forward to an additional term.
Bill, would you grab that door, please? It's hard to hear.
The initial term in 2016 was 3 years. There is no financial commitment if the bond election is unsuccessful. As you see from reading this document, that the fee that we will be paying to Piper Jaffray for those financial services is $2.50 per thousand, up to, I believe, for a minimum of $25,000 and a maximum of $60,000. That is the one change from the 2016 agreement. That agreement was $2 per thousand, minimum of $25,000 and maximum of $60,000. So it's changed a little bit just because it's been 3 years since that agreement was signed. The services that Piper Jaffray will be providing us, as you can read throughout the several different sections, is essentially will assist us in preparing all the financial data that we need in order to go with a general obligation bond issue for the new police station, the remodel of the current police station, and the remodel of the man building. Council's direction was that we will move forward with that bond election on May 21st, 2019. There are two elements other than city staff and design professionals that usually assist with preparing a general obligation bond issue. One is the financial advisor, which Piper Jaffray would serve. Piper Jaffray has served the city in the past in that same capacity. Most recently, when there was a refunding of sewer revenue bonds that ended up, because of interest rates, ended up saving the city approximately $350,000 over the remaining 10 years of that bond issue. The second element of the team, professional team that will assist us in prepping for this bond issue, is bond counsel, which is a specialty of a law firm or an attorney who specializes in the issuance of public debt. So our bond counsel is Danielle Quaid from the firm Hawley Troxel out of Coeur d'Alene. So again, we do have a retention. We've retained Hawley Troxel. Again, we're in that same situation to assist us in this preparing for the bond election. Piper Jaffray wanted to have that 3-year term. And the reason you have a 3-year term, as this one is that if for some reason you have to delay the general obligation bond issue or election, as we have in the past, this is just beginning the 4th year that we were going to go out for a GO bond for the police station. So they're cognizant of the fact that sometimes you delay, sometimes people have bond elections that don't come out the way they want it to come out, so they will have another one. So rather than negotiate new agreements, that's why this is for a 3-year period. So again, it just replaces the agreement that just expired on December 31st of 2018. Had we had this bond election last November, we wouldn't have to redo this agreement. But since we're not going until May of 2019, we're asking the council to approve the agreement. This was not brought to committee, mainly because we did not purchase or enter into an agreement to purchase the land upon which the new police station will be constructed until December 20th. And we've not had a committee meeting since then. We did not want to delay. Staff is working hard on preparing the preliminary data for the bond issue and the other design professionals, so on and so forth. So we wanted to get this to council as quickly as possible so that we don't lose any time.
Questions for Gary?
Can I make a motion?
Sure.
How's that for a question? Your Honor, I would like to move that we approve the attached financial services agreement with Piper Jaffray.
Seconded.
Okay, we got a motion by Gina and a second by Art to approve the attached financial services agreement with Piper Jaffray. I'll start to roll with Catherine.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you very much. We got lots of work to do on that, ladies and gentlemen. We are moving forward. Okay, item number 7, salary survey report. I know we got Jen involved in this and Gary both. So I think they're kind of tag teaming it. Before Gary gets talking on this, one of the things early on, as a mayor, and I told Gary this several years back, I guess the last one we did prior to this was in 2015, and it was very important for me that to find out where all of our city staff, where we lie, where our guys that work in streets or whatever, the sewage plant or our officers or wherever, that we're, that we're fair in what we're doing. Very important to me as the mayor, and so this is, I'm glad that we do these every 3 or 4 years because I think they're very, very necessary. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Gary.
Thank you, Your Honor. As you read in the CCSR and accompanying report, we have, at council's direction, tried to do salary surveys at intervals of 4 years in order to make sure that the compensation system that we have for city employees is comparable within our market area. The market area we'll go into in a little bit, but what we want to do essentially is make sure that our people are paid fairly and equitably, rewarded for their efforts, and we want to make sure that we're paying a wage that ensures that employees that we have trained and developed don't leave our employee to go somewhere else to make more money. And then we have all of the time and efforts put in, and they have their personal time and efforts put in, and then they take their best producing years and go on to another employer. So we want to make sure we take care of our employees, and that's kind of a 3-part system. The first is to make sure that our compensation system is fair and equitable. And as we've talked about in the past, we have 2 separate compensation systems in the city. One is the actively managed performance system, which is a fairly unique thing for government, where employees are rewarded at market or above in cases of very good performance, exceeding expectations. Then in the police department, at the officer, corporal, and sergeant level, at their request several years ago, they were more comfortable with the step and grade system. Step and grade system is one where you start off at a grade, say at a step A. This is a 7-step system, A through G, and then every year, provided you receive a satisfactory performance evaluation, that you will move up 1 step. So there's 3.5% per step, and then so the step and grade system, you know how much you're going to get if you get a successful evaluation. In the AMP system, it's a different system. It's based on kind of a fluid performance. The council allocates a certain amount of money, which is then divided according to performance throughout the city. So one year it might be 3.5%, the next year it might be 4% average, and one year it might be 3%. So, but there is the opportunity to be rewarded for work exceeding expectations above market value. That is not present in the step and grade system. So we want to be very careful that we are paying our folks fairly and making sure that we're retaining them as well. As another part of this that isn't in our evaluation here, every couple of years we do an assessment of how long our employees stay with the city. We want to make sure that their work life is as long as it can be in the city. So if we're retaining employees, say, for 9 years, that's pretty good in this day and age. If you dip down at 7 years or below 7 years, usually means that your workforce is very mobile, or you've got a lot of retirements and you've got new people coming up. So we watch all of that stuff to try and make sure that our employees are fairly compensated and satisfied. Okay, this is really small, so we'll go through it fairly quickly. Most recently, we've done salary surveys in 2006 and 2015. 2015 was a pretty good overhaul of our system. At that time, we looked at the pay for performance system as well as the step and grade system, making fairly significant modifications to the way police officers were advancing to corporal when they were promoted, and then advancing to sergeant upon promotion. We were faced with a system where an officer at step G would go up to become a corporal. They would take over corporal at step A, which would actually be a reduction in their pay. So we shortened both the corporal and the sergeant's pay scales to make sure that did not occur again. Then in the AMP system, we looked at were our assumptions that we made when we first implemented it in 2003 still valid. Those were things like starting employees at 80% of market. We looked at how long it took employees to get to market. At that time, it was determined that about 7 years was about how long it took for someone to become, quote unquote, a journeyman. And since that time, we've reassessed that and determined that actually it's less than 5 years. So we started employees at 85% of market in most cases. That's an employee who starts at the city with qualifications but no experience. So someone who comes in as an apprentice operator, for instance, at the water plant, would be paid an apprentice wage and then would move up as they gain experience and certifications. So that was all done in 2015, so pretty good shape. And we're also getting access to more and more data. Jen's office in Human Resources, when there is a position that is vacated, we have contacts in the network where we can find out whether or not what the prevailing wages are for that type of service in our area. That's called the Northwest Data Exchange, and we're an active member of that. So in 2018, while Mark Brigham was here as HR director, we started a salary survey. Jan Rock did that. Jan also conducted our survey in 2006. 35 positions were surveyed, and there were 9 agencies surveyed as well. You can see the 9 agencies here, and most of them are fairly proximal to us, although there's a couple that are out of our market area a little bit, and those would be not many people are going to drive to Post Falls, or Walla Walla in a day for a day job. However, they were considered to be our market area. A lot of them are very close to us. And again, these are places that if someone still wanted to live in Moscow or in the general area, could they travel to these places? I also forgot Twin Falls. That's a little tough to get up at 6 and be there by 8 o'clock in the morning. At any rate, so we wanted, and Twin Falls was chosen because it was a comparable community, and also because of some challenges that they have. Just driving up the road to Boise, where wages can be higher at times, was something that we wanted to look at how they were handling that as well. Northwest Data Exchange takes into account basically all of Idaho, and then some out-of-state resources that are close to our borders. So you'll see Logan, Utah, Pullman, Salt Lake City, Spokane County. That's because the border of Idaho is also competing with those border of Washington communities as well. So as you can see, Northwest Data Exchange, again, all positions in the city were surveyed, and 36 agencies were compared here. I will tell you that one of the things that really is challenging when doing salary surveys is you take a wastewater, I shouldn't say wastewater now, it's the water reclamation and reuse facility operator here in Moscow may have a very different job from a wastewater plant operator in another community. There may be supervision involved, so on and so forth. There may be different job duties involved. So you really have to dig into those job descriptions to find out if you're being comparable. So that's something that you hope your consultants will do. We found a few of them that we needed to work on further, and we'll get to those in a minute. These were the positions surveyed. Again, don't need to go through all of them. We try to be, you'll notice the patrol officers are in there, sergeants. We try to keep those positions because they're very mobile. An officer in Moscow can go to any other place in Idaho. They've already been through the post academy. They can go as a lateral to another department, and likewise, they could go over to Washington with very little training and get a lateral transfer as well. So, got a lot of people in those positions too, and we need to make sure that we are very competitive with other departments. Okay, there were a couple things that some positions that were eliminated. Not that these are gone, but they're vacant. The Network and Systems Administrator, for instance, Tom Picarella, is now the Assistant Information Systems Director. The Records Supervisor position has been eliminated. That is a position that we no longer have at the city, and that the Property and Records folks over at the police department are filling that position, and a captain is providing more of the overall day-to-day oversight. There were some positions that needed further review, and those were in the maintenance positions. We did note that we've had a few positions where we've had water operators, wastewater operators who have left the city's employ to go other places. So we need to be very careful and make sure, again, that we're paying comparable wages. So we just need some more analysis to be able to do that. And there were some that just those positions didn't exist anywhere. Everybody has a planning and zoning department. You think there'd be a community development director in these other places. They actually are very different. Like at the county, they have a planning commission and a zoning commission, not a P&Z. So their director does very different things than what our community director does, community development director. Okay, there was one position that we needed to give particular attention to, and we will be adjusting that in this budget year, and that is that you'll notice that this is a code enforcement officer position. That's a non-sworn position, so it is under the AMP system. It is now paid at a level 5, and now the recommendation is to go to a level 7. That's a fairly significant jump. And the reason that we will adjust it pretty quickly, the history of this position is that it started out as a part-time position, became a full-time position, and we probably didn't hit the right target when we were trying to set the compensation for it. So that's the one position that we will probably be adjusting this next year as a result of the salary survey. And then we already talked about some of these things. The further review of the apprentice, journeyman, and senior operator scales for applicable positions, that's the street maintenance, water maintenance, wastewater maintenance, et cetera. Okay, one of the other things that we try to do is to look at cost of living. When we first implemented the pay system in 2003, one of the things that we looked at is what is the cost of living in Moscow? And at that time, it was determined that the cost of living in Moscow was estimated to be somewhere between 4 and 5% more than surrounding communities, except for Pullman. Pullman was considered to be higher than Moscow. So at that time, the pay system considered that we would probably, to be fair, need to pay about 5% more than they were paying, say, for instance, in Post Falls or in Lewiston, so on and so forth. Since that time, and it's been about 13, 14 years since that was done, that has become less and less a factor as people are more mobile. You have people driving from Lewiston, driving from Pullman, driving from the Potlatch area, Troy, Deary, so on and so forth, and people driving up from Lewiston, people in Moscow driving to Lewiston. So it's a very mobile workforce. Plus, there's really not excellent data out there in one place. Jen will talk a little bit about the statistics in a moment, but these are the sort of things that you look at. We look to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the census, and some other documents. As you can see, it's all listed here. You can certainly look in any of those if you like. But food, housing, utilities, transportation, health, taxes, and then the ever ubiquitous miscellaneous. One of the things that we wanted to look at, the 2-bedroom rental based on fiscal year housing and urban development fair market rent. You've seen this if you've read the Alice studies that have been sent over. The question is, how much do you have to make per hour in order to afford a 2-bedroom rental? Now, it's a little bit, it's applicable in that it shows a scale. We don't have a lot of city employees living in two-bedroom rentals. We have an abundance of two-bedroom rentals in Moscow because of our highly transitional student population. So, as you might expect, you in Latah County, and they don't break it out for Moscow, amazingly enough, but you would need to make $14.06 per hour in order to in order not to spend more than 30% of your salary on housing. And it just carries through to here. As you can see, Kootenai County, Coeur d'Alene is significantly higher than it is here in Moscow. Now, if you look up here on the top line, one of the things that we've been told anecdotally is that housing is more expensive in Moscow, and the answer is yes, it is. It's more expensive than Lewiston, but it's not more expensive than Pullman. Okay, so it's not right in the middle, but it is about where, I believe there was, I can't remember where the information came from.
Hasn't been any change in that in 40 years.
No, but when people talk about living in Moscow, they talk about that it's extremely expensive, and it is more expensive than Lewiston, not more expensive than Pullman. Okay, Jen, I will turn this over to you for this piece. I really don't like this piece.
So Jen
Really?
gets to do it because you don't like it.
Well, and this doesn't even speak to the statistics side of me. So we are really trying to find not necessarily that you can go out and buy a home in Moscow for $275,000. We are just looking to see where we fell within the spread. If we typically fell at the top end of housing when it came to what realtors are reporting, that HUD study was another good point. If we were at the top end, if it cost $17 to rent that apartment in Moscow compared to others, like, we're high there too. So we're just kind of looking at how we fall into the region as a whole, and really just to kind of take the temperature and make sure that we're in the ballpark when we set our salary schedule, that it doesn't need to be adjusted, even though we have the wages within that schedule in a good place, both externally and internally. So this cost of living, the other piece that we looked at is, honestly, again, with that anecdotal information that it costs so much more to live in Moscow. I went to the internet, the super reliable internet, and I picked up the first two. I know, and I picked a couple of cost of living calculators.
What Trump does
Is that
all
a
the time
different
too.
internet?
Isn't it? Yeah.
We have the
Yep, I have a
super
special
reliable-
internet here at the City Hall. So really just pulled up, said $50,000 income. If I'm making that in Moscow, what do I need to make somewhere else, assuming all other things are equal? So we plugged in our different comparison communities from Lewiston, Twin Falls, Coeur d'Alene, all the way down the board there. And really, we were just looking to see where we shook out in there, knowing full well that it may not interpret that $50,000 like average Joe employee would interpret that $50,000. So it was good to see that we were in the ballpark. We're not the highest, we're not the lowest, but we're still in the right area when it comes to market. So we didn't feel that any real adjustments needed to be made. I think. Yeah, this gets into the recommendations. So this table here is one of the tables that Best Places puts together, and I just pulled Moscow and Pullman because they're our closest neighbor, and this is the different things that they include in their study and how it breaks down. So everything from housing to utilities. I think one of the most interesting things here is health. A score of 94 compared to 93 is interesting. So different factors across the board, but again, knowing just kind of where we lay in that scheme of things was helpful to say, okay, it may cost more to live here, but we're not the most expensive in the region. I think that was a good takeaway. I appreciated Bill Belknap also took a look at all this data and said, well, it's not, Best Places and Smart Assets are an okay tool to use, but he's seeing the same things in his study. The HUD housing study that came with the Alice report, I think, is in the PEP study as well. Yeah. That was one of the flags. I said, hey, wait a minute, maybe we can take a look at some more things to at least get an idea of where we're at. So that was the idea with the cost of living. It's not something we've done. We didn't do it in 2015, and I don't believe we had done it in the previous survey since it had been set in 2003, I think. So it was time to take a look at it. So general information that we think we're okay. So that's not statistically valid at all.
Thank you. We've reviewed salaries, we've reviewed cost of living. Now we will get into benefits a little bit. One of the things that you'll be hearing, hopefully, on the 22nd of January is the proposal to move forward with the self-funded employee health benefits program. And we've given you several proposals on that in the past. Did I just move that forward? I did. No, I didn't. No. Okay. So one of the reasons we want to do that is to try and get as sustainable, best benefits we can get for our employees, and make it as efficient as possible. We'll get more into that on the 22nd, but this looks at what we have now. So if you look at our health insurance, right now, a single premium for a Moscow employee is $616, and single premium average for those comparable cities that we looked at, so a difference of about $27. Family premium was huge, and as you can see, the difference $262. And here's why, or one of the reasons why. The deductible here is $300 versus a $1,000 deductible on average. For a family, a $600 deductible, and family deductible in average most other places about $2,200. So I won't get into the vision and the dental. They're just illustrative. They're certainly closer than health insurance. So we want to talk a little bit about can those be adjusted? And we've talked about that for a couple of years, and we think the first step is to look at this self-funded health insurance. So, and we've got some solutions here that we'll talk about in a moment. One of the other benefits we have is time off. So first we look at leave, and if you look at leave, this is the average of all the folks that we surveyed. This is what ours is. So for 5 years, you can see where we go across the board. We're a little ahead in 5 years, a little behind at 10 years, a little behind, gained a little bit of ground at 15 years, and then at 20 years, again, we take the lead. Sick leave, there are some PTO programs out there, paid time off, rather than sick leave programs. There are some union categories that grant more than 8 hours per month, so that's the main difference here. In retirement, looking at general retirement, for our general employees, Percy employees, we're just a little bit less than average across the area. For police, they're a little bit above average across the area. Fire, we're lagging about 1.43%. And again, that may be a function of union, the presence of a union bargaining unit. So we're looking really good, really in the ballpark on leave time, retirement benefits, health, dental, and vision. So as we start talking about what are some things that can be done, and these are things that we will look at in our HR department and administration as well, and that is, what if we, right now, the city pays for employee health insurance premiums and half of the employee's dependents' health insurance premiums. That is a much higher percentage on the back of the employee than other entities around us. They typically run around 80%, perhaps even up to 85%. There are even a couple of entities that pay the entire dependent premium. So this is what it is right now. Premium for a full family per month is $2,062, and the employee is paying $682 of that. If we went to some different deductibles, it would significantly change those numbers. So that is something that we'll be looking at as well. And again, the idea is, and just so you know the level of analysis that's being done, I believe our last survey, employee survey we did, said that, I can't remember if it was 48% or 60% of our employees, even with that small deductible of $300 and $600 for a family, that percentage of employees weren't getting above the deductible. So the difference to them, whether it's a $300 deductible or it is a $10,000 deductible, really doesn't make a difference. So there are some strategies that can be employed. And I also want to take this opportunity to congratulate and thank the employees for really becoming good stewards of their health care. They are moving forward. They're utilizing, we've got some telemedicine that we're going to be picking up. When they go to the pharmacy, they're utilizing generics. A lot of good things are being done in order to try and keep that cost down, and that's been working. So those are some places we think that we've got some ability to adjust as well. Go ahead, Jim.
On the slide where it compared the costs, there was almost 12% or something difference between Moscow and Pullman in the health part of it. It was
Yes.
like 80.
That
What
guy
do you
there?
attribute that to?
I don't think.
Why it would
we
be?
don't have any idea.
Do doctors charge that much more in Moscow than they do in Pullman, or the hospital charges that much more, or the pharmacies charge that much more on this side of the border?
I have no idea. And these websites don't break it all down like that. That's why, as Jen said, you go on the internet, you get what they've got. And you're looking, as we were looking for cost of living. Yeah, we were kind of looking for, okay, where do we compare in degree with everybody else? So you're going to get some aberrations. I don't know.
Utilities,
what
transportation
that
is the same.
Yeah.
And miscellaneous is damn near the same.
Yeah, it's
That's
very
just-
close
Health-
except
but
for
healthcare's
housing.
12% difference.
Yeah, there's skewed.
There's something going on there that doesn't meet the eye.
Yeah.
But certainly, maybe that's how, if we do the self-insurance, we can compensate for that somehow.
And one of the, I guess the conclusion I'd like to draw from this and would ask the council to consider is that our system's in pretty good shape. We've found that there are a couple little aberrations that we need to deal with. We will get those dealt with. But overall, we're in pretty good shape. Now, I will tell you that we are seeing the labor market is still very robust, and we're seeing folks not leaving for higher salaries, but becoming just more mobile. Recruiting is really where we're seeing some of our biggest challenges. People who are in our system and they find out that this is a good place to work, it's got good benefits, you're treated right, you're paid a very competitive salary, but when you're out there advertising for new employees, you've really got to compete. Those starting salaries and the benefits are very critical. So we're also looking through that so that we don't get behind the curve. I remember back in the early 2000s, probably mid-2000s, when we had several police officers flee Moscow to go to places like Snohomish County. I think we lost 2 employees to city of Seattle. And they're paying a huge amount of money, way more money than we can afford. Pullman can't afford to pay those salaries. Spokane can't. So it's very different. But we still, at that time, had to make some significant adjustments in order to remain competitive for recruiting police officers. So that's another thing. We don't want to get behind the curve, and that's one of the reasons we do this thing every 4 years. So with that, I'd submit the report and answer any questions.
Can you remind us what happens when someone reaches the top level of the AMP system or the last grade of step and grade?
When you get to the last step of a step and grade system and you still receive satisfactory employee evaluations, you are given a cost of living adjustment. Cost of living adjustment is calculated by the city. You approve it in the budget every year, but we take the average inflation rate, CPI index, for 12 months from March of one year till March of the next year. So once you're at the top of a step and grade system, you don't get any additional performance increases. You're at the top. You're where the market says you should be. In the AMP system, you can get up to 115% ultimately. If you continue to exceed expectations year after year after year, you can get up to 150% is the absolute maximum. I think our studies show that, we have, I believe it's, and don't hold me to these numbers, but I think we're around 48 to 55 employees who are at 100% or higher, and the balance of our employees, we have about 160 60 employees roughly, below market. And the reason they're below market typically isn't for terrible performance, it's because they're still moving up. They're very new in their jobs. So they will achieve 100% market and then hopefully continue to excel and be eligible to get some premium on top of market.
Okay. And are they moved up with exceeds expectations in AMPS or meets?
Meets expectations will put you, we don't like to use the term average, but it fulfills expectations. It fully meets expectations. If you exceed expectations, and of course it's a continuum, you can have some traits that you're doing where you meet expectations and some where you're doing exceeds or, can't remember what's the top one called? Exemplary. Thank you, Laura. You must have got one once. So typically you can get, there'll be a continuum there. But yeah, if you get an evaluation that you're just fully meeting expectations, that market will be as far as you go.
Okay.
And of course, if you get fully meeting expectations, then you are eligible for the full cost of living adjustment per year. The AMP system's a little more complicated, and I would invite any council member who'd like to come on up, and I will bore you for an hour with how it works. But we seem to be in pretty good shape. The salary survey confirms that.
I really appreciate that we're doing it so frequently, because I, as a U of I employee, you know what it's like when you don't.
Well, in order to stay competitive and in order to be free, you know, with what we're doing, that's exactly what we need to do. And if we're going to expect a high level of performance, we need to be able to do that. And I think, you know, Gary mentioned the word average, and average is like standing on that damn floor out there. It's like, come on, you know, all of us can do a little bit more. And so there's got to be an incentive to be able to do that too. That's how I see it. But that's, you're talking from a former boss that was pretty demanding at one time in my life, so.
And I do want to thank the council for, you know, as we're going through the budget every year, there are things that the council does that show the support of employees. One is the pay system, one is the benefit system. Things like the VIVA program, where $350 is paid into an employee's VIVA account every year to help offset some of the health care costs or to put away for retirement. You know, life insurance is provided equal to 1 year of salary as a benefit to the city, that the city provides. So there are a lot of good things going on in the city, and the employees appreciate your attention to that.
Good report, Gary.
Yep. So what do you think the timing will be for the positions that require the further review? How long is that going to take, do you think?
It depends, but we will begin working on it. Hopefully we'll have a direction by budget time, but it can take up to a year to be able to get all that information. As I indicated, when you're going through these job descriptions line by line, trying to make sure that they are truly comparable, and you've got, how many different positions do we have? You do that for almost every one. So the answer is, if we can get it done by budget, we'll do it. If not, we will be in play for it.
Well, and then just one observation from that last slide with the possibility of the deductible changing. Just, it looks like my little calculation that the amount that the employee would save per month would cover the entire increase of deductible over a year and give them potentially savings if they don't need to use that deductible. Yep. So it sounds like a pretty good option.
Yeah, and we've talked for years about, you know, is there a way to increase VIBA and increase deductibles so that it lessens the impact because all your employees, not all of them are going to be as healthy and not reach their deductible. There are going to be some that have a catastrophic something happen, and they're going to hit that deductible, and it's, you know, it's going to be bad. So when engineering or setting up a healthcare plan, you really need to look at those who use it most often and those who use it almost not at all, and try to come to some compromise so that each end of the spectrum is treated fairly.
Mm-hmm.
Good report, Gary. Yeah. Any other questions for Gary?
And I want to
Okay.
thank Jen for all of her work on this. I get the glory of presenting it, but she did a bunch of the work.
Except for
Good
the
job.
2 hard slides, right?
Good job, Jen.
Couldn't get there.
Just
Thank
want to say that.
Okay, well, with that, that's the end of our meeting, so we'll move on to reports. Geez, we had like 3 weeks of nothing going on, so I imagine the reports are gonna be pretty slim. I'll start with the new Presidente, Jim.
The only thing I have is from Human Rights Commission, and on the 19th, we've got the annual Martin Luther King Human Rights Breakfast coming up on Saturday at 9 a.m. over
What
at
was
the
the date
junior
on
high.
that, Jim?
The date?
Yeah.
The 19th.
Thank you.
At the middle school, 9 to 11. I will be
So
there.
everybody can
It's a good time.
make plans to attend that. It's always well-attended, and it's a good event. That's all I have.
Okay, Art.
Nada.
Nada, yeah, I knew it was gonna be pretty slim. Randy.
I can report on URA. It was December 20th. That was the only thing I have between the last council meeting
Yeah,
and this one.
it's been pretty slim this time.
There are an Alturas 2 lots currently under exclusive negotiation agreement for the Alturas Analytics expansion. Bill Belknap had received an inquiry on the remaining 4 lots for a single project, and an RFP was due on January 11th, so I have not heard if that came through or what that status is, so we can be optimistic for that report at next URA. And the URA has received 3 proposals in response to the 6th and Jackson lot, so
Nice.
those will be coming to the board at the January 17th, is it? The next URA meeting.
Okay.
Not this Thursday, but next Thursday. That's it.
Tina.
I got nothing, sir.
Okay.
I had 2 meetings in January. January 3rd.
You're the only one. I see you there on top of it.
The Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival preparatory meeting, we started that with Arts Commission. And so they talked about all the plans, and I got to meet all the special collections people from the university, and Josh Skinner, who's in charge of it, and all the plans that are getting made, and Megan Cherry that is, getting acquainted with everything going on, so that's exciting, and they've got the prospectus and all the things that are going to happen. They talked about the unveiling of the poster for the 54th annual festival, which will be February 15th at the Chamber of Commerce, and they've got some other events planned. And then the farmers market had their meeting, and Jen has been leading them through strategic planning. And what I've also got to be with the Arts Commission as she's done with their strategic planning, and I saw the beginning of you and Gary doing that with the fire department. And these commissions and organizational parts are really benefiting from that, and they are all working super hard. So I commend you both on pushing them through strategic planning, because it is showing them, and they really are excited about what's going on. So that's great. But the farmers market went ahead and they revoted their chair position, who is Jamie Hill, and I thought it was cool because they postponed the VP selection because they're trying to get a vendor rep to be there, and I thought that was really cool. And then they went all through their fee revision of the 2018 season and looked at the 2019 structure and had a very deep conversation about how to be fair to the vendors, and they're interested in actually having another seat on that commission as a vendor. And so I recommended them that the commission members talk to you, because and they are excited about really continuing to grow the farmers market. And I thought that one of the members, Colette DePhelps, said at the meeting, she said, Moscow's identity is based on the concept of the necessity of the farmers market, when actually the market is an amenity to the city. And I thought she put that really well, because we do feel like it is our city's market, and that's the depth of thinking on these commissions. So I've always been appreciative of that. And I want to thank you all. I'm glad to be stepping down as president of the council.
Okay, well, I've got one report, and that's our Mayor's Youth Advisory Council. We met on January the 4th. Executive Leadership Group did, and so we had some of our advisors. I'm the advisor to the chair and the co-chair. Lori is the advisor to the secretary. Jen is advisor to our historian, and Sarah Banks is our advisor to our treasurer. And one of the things I told these kids is that they've got a wonderful
Thing ahead of them where they've got these professional women that know what they're doing and adhere to that and work with that. And it'll be something they'll never forget throughout their career and as they go on into their adulthood. So that was a fun thing. And I just want to say something about MIAC. And we've got next Monday, we'll have a MIAC meeting in here with the kids. And I'm feeling really good about moving forward in 2019 because we've got all the players pretty well in place now. We're moving forward and we're trying to figure out what these kids are going to do and some of the different things they can do for fundraisers and stuff. So it's kind of an exciting time. So it's really fun working with them. One thing I will mention, the next council meeting will be on Tuesday, January the 22nd because of Martin Luther King. And by the way, you'll have to run that because I'll be down in Boise for AIC, Jim, so you'll be in charge of the meeting.
Okay.
So there you have it. Gary, do you have anything for us?
Yeah, there is. We're looking into the possibility on the 22nd of maybe having the meeting an hour earlier, starting at 6 o'clock. Part of that is to accommodate the short week and the AIC and IDCMA schedules down in Boise. I will be leaving the meeting and driving to Boise that night. So, but it is the night that we hopefully will be presenting the self-funded employee health insurance. So I feel kind of obligated to be here for that. So anyway, I'll work with the mayor and we'll see what we can do there. If the council, I'm assuming that would be okay with the council if the mayor decides to do that. Okay. And also I have to admit, I did not look at the agenda, Your Honor, and I need a motion to accept the salary survey report. Sorry about that.
I will move to accept the salary report.
Okay, and Jim and Brandy
Okay.
co-did it.
Sure, yeah.
I'll start the roll with Catherine.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
The salary report is accepted. I really didn't realize we had to have a motion on that because
It
it's
didn't
just a
say it.
report.
Well,
So-
the
Is there
Attorney
some
General
rule
and the
about
state
that?
law now tells us that we have to have action items for all of our agendas.
Okay. Well, okay, ladies and gentlemen, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Let's roll.
Let's get out of here.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are out of here at 8:55. Thank you, everybody.